Thank you so much. Thank you to Valerie and Mountain Cloud, Valerie, for your very kind invitation. It's a real honor to be here, to sort of share my my understanding of Zen, and to talk tonight about one of my favorite Zen koans, Original Face, and how I came to understand it more deeply. First of all, spoiler alert or a caveat, I'm not going to give the answer. I'm looking at you, Natalie. I might give an answer to my understanding of the koan, but koans are invitations. They're not problems to be solved or riddles with answers. And my understanding that I'm sharing is from one moment, one day, on one mountain, and it changes, and I come back to that moment, and there's always new revelations. So don't worry, I'm not going to give it away. If anyone was worried. Also, just make yourselves comfortable. I'm going to... I am going to probably be moving a little bit, just to stay comfortable, and maybe be doing some weird, like, sitting yoga poses with my legs. Just everyone make themselves at home. And so this, as I said, is a talk about one of my favorite koans, Original Face. And it's adapted from a chapter in my new book that I'm working on, which is called How to Disappear. And this book is a work in process right now, and has been for a couple of years. And you would say maybe that it's a very loose sequel, or it's a trilogy. It's in conversation with my previous two books, but don't tell my agent that. Anyway, and so it's called How to Disappear, and I'm working on it, and I have not written this chapter yet. And I love giving Dharma talks and that invitation, because they're always little nudges for me to turn towards something that I have been feeling deeply inside and maybe not wanted to face or been putting off. And as you'll see, I hope when I tell this story, that it's sort of this crux moment in this book that I'm working on. And like any crux moments and any things that happened in the past, like your memory of it, when you think about it, there's a fear, am I not remembering it right? Or did I overblow it in my mind? It seemed like this big revelation at the time, but what if I go back into my notebooks and I find like blank pages, or, just a one line, like I ran a race the other day. And so in my mind, I was afraid of that. And in fact, I just opened my notebooks last night from this day and this moment that I'll be telling you about tonight, and I was pleasantly surprised that there was a lot there that I'd written. And so I just transcribed it into my iPad, and that's why I have this here, because there's some things that I'm just going to be telling the story, I hope, as best I can and as fluidly as I can. Just bear with me, because I haven't told it before. But there's a few times when I'm actually going to read directly from my notebooks, because it was so fresh at the time, and it's hard to paraphrase it, and why paraphrase it when it's just at its essence. Anyway, I study Zen on my own mostly, though I do, Valerie's amazing teachings have kept me company on many mountain run and bike ride and walk around my neighborhood. But really my practice is reading, listening, doing my own writing, and being in the mountains. You could really say that mountains are my Zen practice. And specifically in the period that I'm talking about tonight, running in the mountains. That's changing a little, like everything, right? Impermanence, isn't that one of the Four Noble Truths? So, yeah, it's a lifelong practice. Anyway, so the koan, and just don't get mad if I sort of flub it, because I have listened to it a lot, and Henry Schuckman, who did some beautiful Zen teachings on koans on the Sam Harris app, Waking Up, was a source for this. So there's two monks, right? I feel like I'm setting up for a joke.
Two monks walk through a marsh.
Two monks, one's chasing the other. It's Wei Nang, right? Is that how you say his name? Wei Nang. In the 7th century, and he is an impoverished woodcutter, and he has had some Zen revelations himself, and he shows up at a monastery, as far as I'm going to tell it. And the head of that monastery is looking to anoint a successor, right, a Dharma heir. And he invites all the monks into the zendo to write verses. And the monks file in and they write their verses, and there's one that looks really great up on the wall. And the master is like, that's pretty good, I think that's the one. And then Wei Nang, in the middle of the night, slips in because he's sort of off to the side, having not really followed the formal Zen path. He comes in and writes his own. And in the morning, the Zen master sees it, and it's like, his head comes off practically. He sees that that's the true Dharma. And so he tells Wei Nang privately that he's going to be his Dharma heir, but that he needs to scram for about 10 years and go into the mountains, because the other monks who have followed this path, the more traditional path, might get upset. And so the master gives him the robe that signals that he's the Dharma heir, and he, obeys, and he starts to go up into the mountains to disappear. And but then he realizes he's being chased, and a monk named Mio, is that right? Mio. He used to be a general, so he was quite fierce, I'm gathering. But he chased him, and when he caught up, Wei Nang was like, he's holding the robe, and Mio was like, I'm not here for the robe. And Wei Nang's like, what are you here for? And he's like, I'm here for the Dharma. And that's when Wei Nang asked the question that would become this very classic koan, which is, in various ways, but this is the way I understand it: what was your original face before even your parents were born? Like, why are you chasing me? What are you here for? What is your original nature? And from my understanding or my interpretation, he was saying, is there some kind of consciousness or essence that predates your birth, your parents' birth? What is your true nature? What is your original self? Is there some kind of fundamental consciousness? And so this koan, when I first heard it, I'll just paint the picture. It's 2021. We're coming out of COVID. Everything's upside down. I have just kind of reached, been at my peak of ultra running. As Valerie mentioned, I ran a big race in 2018 and I won, and I had a lot of success in the immediate aftermath of that as well. But COVID, as it did for so many, threw a wrench into things. And so there were difficulties just at home with COVID, and trying to make a living as a writer, and trying to run with a body that was changing, and also just making peace and accepting the changes, right? So the work I was really doing was coming down from the big mountain and coming back into my life, to try to forget myself and forget what I had done, and to arrive in myself as I was then, right? To not hold on to how it had been. And I'm sure I was not doing it gracefully. Anyway, the Zen was my ballast during that time, and the koans. And so I was studying koans that summer, listening to Henry's teachings, and then trying to absorb them into my body as I ran on the mountain. And Original Face just struck me. It touched me in some way, that koan, because I was asking myself the same question. What is my original face before my parents were born, before I was running in the mountains, before I was winning races, before I had this identity that I became attached to? And it seemed an important question to sit with and run with and sort of take with me into the next chapter, because, like I said, everything changes, and we can't hold on to what we were. And so what is my true self? And it seemed like how it relates to disappearing, it seemed like a question not of disappearing, but appearing to yourself, right? Understanding who you were before you became you. And when you do that, then you do disappear, right? You become more one with all things. And so it's this Zen koan, it's a paradox. And that's what I was wrestling with. And that summer I also was training for a 50-mile race up in the mountains in Colorado called the San Juan Solstice. And much of the race, like a lot of the races I run, was above 12,000 feet in elevation, which is my favorite. I love being above tree line with my head sort of into the clouds, where I feel most free and most connected to myself, and most aware of running as an inward journey of discovery and self-expression. And so this race is notoriously difficult because it's so high and it's really rugged. And as much as I love running, I'm terrified of lightning. And a chief feature of this race or this course was there's 8 miles of it, of 50 miles, on the Continental Divide Trail, which is high up on a ridge. And there's no egress. It doesn't dip down below tree line. There's not tree line immediately off to side. So if there's a lightning storm, you're exposed, and you're exposed for 8 miles. And so, like with all my races, I did my due diligence, and I was asking questions of people and friends who had run it. And one of my friends gave me clear instructions. He had run it before, and he had paced me at the Leadville, and I trusted him implicitly. And he said, when you get to the Carter aid station, which is up high, which is right before you get onto the Continental Divide, he said, if there's lightning in the sky, if you hear thunder, don't go. And you do not want to get caught up there. And so I knew what was at stake, and I decided in myself that I would listen to that. Even though I knew if it was storming, it would mean my race might be over there, or I'd have to wait a long time until it passed. But I was willing to do that. And so I was getting ready, and so much of my readiness is that due diligence, obviously the training, but that just goes into it without saying. But then a lot of mental training and sort of sitting with my Zen and connecting to sort of why I'm doing this in the first place. Sorry. And so in my notebook, and I'm going to quote some things that I wrote, I was writing down some Zen quotes that I felt would be good companions with me on the race. And one of them, I don't have an attribution, but I think it's Suzuki Roshi. Be yourself in the present moment without sticking to an old self. You forget about yourself and are refreshed. That seemed like a pretty good mantra for what I was trying to do, right? Go forward into the moment without clinging to an old identity. Then I wrote down this quote, which I love, and I think of it constantly to this day. We do not practice Zen to attain enlightenment, but rather to express our true nature. So I love that. It's such a good companion for me when running, because, or doing really anything that's meaningful that you are dedicated to, is we do not give a Dharma talk to attain enlightenment, but to express our true nature, right? So immediately that sets you at ease. Like, I'm here to just express my true nature. I'm on the mountain to express my true nature. I'm mothering my daughters to express my true nature. And so then in my notebook, I wrote my own quote, excited to run tomorrow to express my true nature through running, my original face before even my parents were born, a timeless nature that goes beyond me and even them, inhabiting no place, I inhabit and am part of all places. So that's my mindset, and we're driving up, and I have my husband and 2 daughters with me. And often, my friend Natalie can attest to this, I go alone. And going alone is difficult because it's lonely, but bringing my family is hard too, because I'm juggling being a mother and having to be in my space of getting ready and sort of a deep inward preparation and their needs and my needs, and then my husband too. And his name's Steve, and he gets stressed before my races, and I really can now understand that that's what it is. He's anxious for me. But what happens is sometimes we get into these sort of conflicts because I'm stressed, and so it's the day before the race, and we've got 6 hours to drive up to Lake City, and I'm watching the weather constantly. And my friend Wes, who had been my pacer, is sending me, the most elaborate weather forecast from like the wonkiest weather. It's not your Apple Watch weather. It's some deep weather service, and it looks bad. It's going to storm early on the mountain, and it's a big system. So I'm really nervous, and we're in the car, and there's 2 dogs and 2 daughters and my husband, and we just get into it right away. Not right away, but in the car, my husband and I, something triggers us and we're fighting. And we've had car fights before. If you've read Brief Flashings, there's a pretty good one in there. And it just seems like it makes sense, right? We're all cooped up, and there's a lot going on. And my husband doesn't want me to get caught up above tree line, in a storm. He's worried for me. And so anyway, we fight, and there's a lot of words that are said, and a lot of resentments coming out, and some comments of like, it's a hobby, running is for me, and I don't make money doing it, and why do it, and nothing that's new, right? Trail running does not have big purses or any purses. Like, I'm making my living, cobbling together my writing, and though I'm having success as a runner, you don't make a dime. You get like a cup or, a ribbon. But I was never really in it for the money. But that's you can see the conflict in the marriage, right? In many marriages. And so it's a bad one, and it's worse because our girls are in the car and there's nowhere to go. And anyway, we get to Lake City, we pull in, and we've just, I reserved a room, and it's the last room in town, and it's at like a crappy, excuse my language, motel with like fake wood siding, and, one tiny window and 2 lopsided beds, and there's so many bodies in the room between the dogs and the girls, and they immediately turn on the TV, and it's like endless reruns of Friends, and I just can't get into my zone. And the fight is really lingering, this conflict. And it's raining, and the storm's looking bad. Anyway, needless to say, I'm not in the greatest mindset for the race at all. And so I wake up and it's race day, and now I just have to do it, and I have to go out into it. And I've prepped everything, and I think I get up alone and go. Maybe someone walks with me to the start. It's a few blocks. Lake City's a tiny town. And I start running, and it's still dark enough that you sort of need a headlamp, but pretty soon right after I start, I realize I didn't need it. And I've got, my food and my water and my hydration and everything I normally carry. And the first 11 miles are this long climb. And I'm ready for it. I knew it. My friend Wes of the weather forecast had briefed me on it. And like everything that would come that day, I would learn later, it sounded worse than it would ultimately be. But it was 11 hard miles, and there's stream crossing, and there's boggy parts, and the top women, of which like I expected that I would be part of, just disappeared. And almost right away, I'm really down on myself. I'm down. I've got this hangover from the fight, the hangover of the words like amateur and hobby, and maybe I'm even like a fading, I'm fading out, right? What's the word? Like a fading talent, a has-been, right? Maybe those are my words, but of course they're coming up. And it's hard, and I should have had my trekking poles. They really help me when I run, when I'm going uphill, less so when I'm going downhill, and I didn't. And so it's just the struggle bus, the whole 11 miles. And as I'm getting down on myself, I am feeling that I'm living up to or down to my husband's kind of assessment of me. And again, that was made in a stressful situation. I'm like, why am I doing this if I'm not, good anymore? And looking at Natalie, I don't think I've told you this story. And it was never about being good. It was about always the revelation and the sort of true nature that I would express. But in the moment when you're in a race, it's easy to get down. And I come up to this beautiful summit, and I'm like, okay, is this the aid station? Because there's aid stations every 8 to 12 miles or 5 to 8 miles. And I saw nothing there, but I saw a beautiful sunrise and a really lovely spot for a tent. And I was like, oh, I could have spent the night here. And so I can see the beauty, right? I can come out of the suffering enough to see the beauty. And we kind of crest another ridge, and up high, now we're above tree line. We're not on that exposed part yet. And I'm like, oh, I really want to take this in. But I didn't. That was not the energy of the day. The energy of the day was keep moving, like keep your position, keep going because you're struggling mentally so much. And then there was a downhill, and we're coming into the aid station called Williams Campground, which is where I'm going to see my husband and girls, and they're there. And I've already made up my mind that I'm going to drop, because I don't feel great and I'm having such a down day mentally. And I'm like, I'm going to see them and I'm just going to tell them that's it. I'm stopping. And you kind of come in, you come off the mountain and you come through the chute on this dirt road, and there they are. And they have my chair set up, which is really loving gesture, like a little chair that I could sit in. There was stream crossings. Maybe I was going to change my sneakers. They have a lot of stuff for me that I may or may not use. And they'd set up my chair, and I felt like, oh, that's so loving. But on top of that, I was still mad. I was mad about the fight, and I was carrying the words and the harmful words with me. And I was carrying the decision that I was going to quit. My heart just was not in it. And so I come in and I sit in the chair and I cry a little. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. I want to stop. This does not matter. And I'm crying, and I look up across, and the road is lined with supporters. And I see this guy seeing me, and like maybe he recognizes me, but he sees that I'm crying, and I don't care. Like, I'm just crying. And I was like, I said to Steve again, it doesn't matter. And he said, it matters a lot, and it doesn't matter at all. And something like that, but that was pretty much the essence. It matters a lot, and it doesn't matter at all. And it was so zen in that moment, and so strangely true. And I was still crying a little, but his words must have penetrated me, because that's when I realized I wasn't going to quit. I didn't have a good enough reason to quit. Wanting to drop or stop didn't cut it. And I knew that I would feel worse if I dropped. And plus, he had all the stuff. They had my little bag, They had a glass of Coke. They had salt pills. They had my favorite sour candy, sour sketty, and they had some warm layers that I was going to take to go up the mountain. And I took it all. I drank the Coke. I didn't take the sour sketty. And my husband was like, "Well, we're going to see you at mile 40, and we'll have it there." And that's 25 miles from there. And he's like, "We'll see you there." And just hearing him say it, I could hear that he didn't doubt it. And then all of a sudden, I didn't doubt it either. So I leave the aid station with more stuff, right? Because I've taken more layers, because I'm about to go above tree line. But somehow I feel lighter, just a little bit. And as I run out, there's a porta potty, and I stop, and I've already been passed by so many people in the aid station because I was going to quit, and I was crying, and it didn't matter. And that I was like, what's a few more people passing me while I take time to go to the bathroom? So I went to the bathroom, and then I saw our car with the dogs in it, and I stuck my face in the car, and the dog licked me, and I was like, okay, this is, I'm in this. And so the road after that was good. It was like a long, climbing, gentle, grade, forested road, and something called the Alpine Loop, and it was winding up, and I was getting some momentum back. And then it started to climb more steeply up into the subalpine. We're still in the trees, but you're getting higher, and it's beautiful. And my mood is lifting as I'm getting into the mountains. And we passed this really remote ghost town called Carson, just below Timberline. And I stop at an aid station and they give me more Coke, and the volunteers take my trash, which is another very loving thing in a race. When someone doesn't just give you food, but they're like, just empty your pockets. I know you've got a lot of sticky, gels in there. And so to empty them and to sort of relieve yourself of something was just a very kind moment. And so I kept going, and now I'm above tree line. I'm not yet on the Continental Divide, but I'm watching the sky. And I'm watching it closely. And up ahead, I see a guy that I recognize, and I recognize him by his floppy hat. And it's like this weird sun hat that you wouldn't normally see on a runner. And I know him from the Jemez race that I ran. He's a scientist in Los Alamos, a Russian scientist. And we'd sort of looked after each other at another race. And so I kind of pull in behind Sergey. And we're talking, and he's briefing me on the course. And I'm constantly looking in the sky. And I told him my plan, that if it was thundering, I wasn't going to go. And it's not. There's a lot of gray in the sky, and I can tell it's going to rain in waves, but that there's no electricity in the clouds. And so I make the decision, I'm going. And now it's up for 8 miles on the Continental Divide. And the trail is as wide as my 2 feet. I mean, it's this narrow ribbon on this ridge, sort of undulating, precipice on both sides, just beautiful. Like the prettiest. And it's also the hardest, because now we're above 13,000 feet. And there's a woman ahead of me, and I keep her in view. And Sergey's behind me, and we sort of just roll along. But, it's challenging. And it's on this stretch, no surprise, that the koan, original phase, starts to rise in me. And it's not that I'm thinking of it. I'm actually thinking, I should stop and put my trekking poles away because they're hindering my gait. And I should probably eat something, but I'm too lazy to stop. And that's what I'm thinking. But the koan is just coming for me. And it was coming through the mountains and from the air. What is your original face before even your parents were born? And I'm going to read right from my notebook, because I wrote this the day after the race. And it's so exactly what I was feeling. The answer that kept coming to me over and over, not from my thinking brain, but from a deeper part of me, was the mountain. The mountain is my original face. I was not trying to understand this or explain it to myself. There were and are no explanations. But the feeling I had was of the mountain being older than any of us, a witness and a stalwart, and yet alive with energy and sureness. This mountain was not just a mountain. It was all of energy and all of time. It was the whole of everything in the world and all time, and also before time. And we were all on the mountain, moving along its narrow back, skipping along its spine together and apart. Sergey was sometimes close on my heels, sometimes farther away, sometimes talking, mostly silent beneath his floppy brim. And it was the mountain that was rising in me as a kind of answer or a response without requiring validation or confirmation. And I didn't feel a spark of electricity in my understanding, but rather a widening of space around me, a settling into the space that I and the mountain occupied. I was not afraid of the sky, but nor was I indifferent to it. I watched the sky as it sat upon the mountain and began where the mountain ended, was both a boundary to the mountain and its opposite, emptiness. So I'm running with that. Again, it's like a feeling, not even really words. I only put those words to it the next day. And so I'm running the divide, and eventually it ends, right? And we come off, and I can really just see it. Like couldn't remember any of this until I read my notebooks. We come off through this brushy section, and we get on to another trail, and we get to an aid station, and Sergi and I are together still, and we take our time this time. Like, I'm eating oranges, and I slurp some ramen, and Sergi is really recommending the orange wafer cookies, which I sample, and after the aid station, I thought it was going to be downhill, but it's not. It's still climbing, and the mountain in me and my original face of the mountain is in me, and then also the anger comes back, right? Original face had not eclipsed it, you know. I was still in my body and in my heart on the mountain. You know, anger that I didn't have more support, anger that sometimes I felt an actual like deliberate hostility. And I just remember feeling like I wanted to yell into the air. Like, I just wanted to yell it all out. You know, cry out in my weakness. I think that's a quote from Rumi. And I didn't care if anyone heard. And somehow just even thinking that and realizing I didn't care, I didn't do it. I didn't need to. That had sort of let it out. And I put my music on instead, which is like, taking 4 Advil when you're running. Like, immediately everything feels better when you've got music. And people are like, oh, you can't run with music, it disconnects you. But it actually more connects you into my moment and myself. And I'm running with Sergi, and he's briefing me, and I just start to go faster, and I know, this is when I know I'm in it, like, I'm really in it, and why? To show myself that I can stick with hard things and finish, even when I started so low. And more important, what was coming to me too was that I could make a plan for my home life. And I was really clear what I wanted. I wanted harmony in the house, and I wanted maybe happiness too, if that was possible. And I saw, as I was running, and I was carrying the mountain, the original face of the mountain, and me and my body, and my Russian spy friend, and all the things, that I could take steps to make it happen. I could even maybe leave my house in order to stay. And somehow just having that vision, it was like the path going out before me. It recommitted me to the run and to my life. And I had this clear sense of what I wanted, actually what I needed. And it was like the original face, the mountain, so impervious forever, and my own stamina in kind of conversation with it. My stamina in staying, but also realizing I might need to leave. And so we're just running some more, and we pass some men who don't look very good. One guy is wearing like a rotator cuff brace, and I was worrying for him, but now I just knew I had like a few miles, and I was going to come into mile 40, and I'd see Steve and the girls into Slumgullion. And sure enough, I come in, and they're really surprised to see me. Not that I made it, but that I'm in such a different headspace. And they've got all the stuff, the Coke, the sour sketty, which this time I take. And there's only 10 miles to go. And I'm just now being carried like by my own conviction and what I felt up on the mountain. And the path being clear in front of me, and how I might save myself, and not wait for someone to save me, right? And that feels like an essence, something deeper than just me in this moment. And so it's really rocky, and Sergei's like, it's gonna get really ugly, the last stretch to the road, and of course, as usual, like, he overplayed it, and it really wasn't that bad. And I come off the trail, and I'm on the roads of Lake City, which are, if you've ever been there, are dirt, and there's a man in a driveway, and I'm waving, and Sergei's not behind me anymore, and no one's in front of me, and I'm just by myself on the road, and I come into the finish chute, there's some kids, and now, you know, someone's radioed my number and name, and so they announce my name, and Steve and my girls are there, and it's this, you know, elated moment, but it's also, I'm carrying with me what I've learned, which was heavier this time, you know, of having to look after myself and to understand what I deeply wanted. And that really didn't have to do with running. That was caring for myself in a deeper way. And so I come back into my life and I write, you know, I write this experience, but I carry, the day fades, obviously. I didn't remember so many of these details until I read it, but I carry that deep affinity and connection to that koan, original face, with me. And it becomes like a touch point again and again when we're required to make changes, or our body asks us to make changes, or our, you know, work situation asks us to make changes. Our daughters grow up and they, you know, we have to keep changing. I come back to that. What was your original face before even your parents were born? What was your essence? What is your true nature before circumstances? And that becomes a ballast that roots me in and gives me peace and consolation, that all the sort of stuff outside, inside there's a truth that's beyond me. And so I guess I just offer that koan in this story as an invitation to you all when, you know, when life is constantly throwing these changes like it always does, because we know that's what happens. Who are we? What is our true self? And to find strength in that, like I did on the mountain. Thank you.